Heather, have people been let into the room?
I'm letting everyone in right now.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to another great webinar from Rock for Aging, sponsored on behalf of Gilead's HIV/AIDS Positively initiative. Today, we have a special speaker backed by popular demand, Dr. Maile Karras. Dr. Maile Karras is an associate professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases and Geriatrics at the University of California, San Diego. Her clinical practice focuses on the care of people living with HIV and actively incorporates principles of geriatrics. Dr. Karras's research addresses clinical and translational questions at the intersection of aging with HIV. For example, improving the management of chronic pain in older adults with HIV and evaluating the clinical impact of loneliness and social isolation. Without further ado, I bring you Dr. Karras. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shauna. It's really always a pleasure to be here with you all, and I'm very grateful that you invited me back a second time to talk to everybody. This time around, I wanted to try to do something a little bit different. You know, the last talk I gave to the community, someone had just commented kind of casually on the side, I'm so tired of hearing about all the bad things, you know, that happens to us. And, you know, in truth, the reason why there's a lot of HIV research papers that are more negatively skewed is because, you know, we're doing this all for a reason. You know, if we say, hey, there's this big problem here, NIH, you need to give us money to study it. You know, a negative skew, I think it influences that better. Also, from a policy standpoint, if we're saying there's all this stuff going on, this negative stuff, we need to do something about it, potentially, you know, we could increase access to policy funds. But today, I don't want to do that. So today, what we're going to do is try to have a more positive spin. I'm hoping that this conversation today will be more conversational, not just me talking to you, but us having a conversation and thinking about how do we do this together? How are we going to move forward as we're all aging, as we're all living, because living is aging? How do we actually continue to embrace life as things are changing for us? And I say that because I too am aging, and I'm starting to get some concerning symptoms as well. And there are some days where I'm like, man, I wish I was younger. And some other days where I'm like, I'm so glad that I'm not who I was before. So today we're going to be talking about embracing life. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of literature in the HIV world that has a positive aging spin on it. There is some in successful aging, but I've pulled data from both the HIV world and the general older adult world. So this is kind of a mixture of information today. Oops, sorry. I'm having some issues here. So in the last 12 months, I have gotten research funding to the institution from Gilead Sciences and ViiV Healthcare, but I do not have any current funding. I'm not currently funded on any speaker or advisory boards. And I will not be talking about antiretroviral therapy today. So the evolution of HIV, as you all are likely aware, you know, HIV has evolved pretty significantly over the last 30 to 40 years from what was originally considered a death sentence to now, you know, a chronic medical condition that is manageable. And really the future, a little bit now, but the future, you know, HIV, I do believe will be curable. We've cured 5 people already. We haven't quite made it to the point where we feel that we can cure more than that or everybody, but I'm very confident that at some point we will have a cure available for people living with HIV. Now, similarly, along those lines, HIV used to be handfuls of medications daily that were just really difficult to take and very toxic. And now we have easily available every 2-month injections. The future, and this is probably going to come sooner than I had actually originally anticipated. I do think very, very soon we're going to be having every 6-month injections. I saw a little preview from CROI next week, which which makes me think that this is going to be a feasible strategy for a lot of people very, very soon. Again, I think in the past, there was a lot of fear of getting HIV. Right now, HIV is or could be 100% preventable as if we could implement the strategies that we have, PrEP and continuous antiretroviral therapy to everybody who is living with HIV and at risk of HIV. And I do believe that HIV will eventually be eradicated. This will be something that we will look back and I think have a lot of pride on, and not just physicians and researchers, but truthfully, when we do achieve eradication, it's on, it's because of the hard work of the community, and really the community is I think the only reason that we are here where we are today with HIV. Again, like most of you, I'm sure, have been seeing an HIV specialist for a very long time. I don't know how many of your HIV doctors have asked you to start seeing someone also in primary care to help manage some of your other chronic medical conditions that are not HIV specifically related. I know several of my colleagues don't feel comfortable just managing alone some more of the more complex patients. And in the future, I think we're going to have more geriatricians be seeing people living with HIV. So there's been this really beautiful evolution of HIV. And that evolution kind of mirrors the experience of an individual who is getting diagnosed with HIV. So an initial HIV diagnosis, including today, is often one of the most traumatic events of a person's life. Many people are shocked and experience a lot of fear, and it's a big struggle initially. But at some point, people have experienced some sort of turning point event. For example, they encounter someone else with HIV who's healthy and doing well, or, they get started on an HIV medication and they start to feel better and they have less concern about this HIV diagnosis and the unknown. And as they're going through that, they kind of change from this period of shock and fear or this experience of shock and fear to starting to immerse themselves more in this HIV community that's so wonderful and supportive. HIV often starts to kind of take center of their identity at that point. It as they're experiencing these wonderful social interactions in this community, they start to really reclaim that HIV diagnosis. And at that point, they may even talk about this in a more public way. This is my experience, to influence others and to also support others. And from that point on, though, sometimes people burn out from only being identified as HIV, and start to kind of move into what they call this post-emergent point or this integration point, where instead of HIV being the central identity, it's just another part of me. That yes, I'm living with HIV, but I have other things that I'm interested in doing. I have other things that just describe who I am as a person, and the life balance kind of comes back into that picture. I'd also like to propose that there is a fourth turning point after that kind of transition and more into integrating HIV into my life rather than me being immersed in HIV. I want to call this transcendence. So I see transcendence as expanding a person's boundary or one's boundary to really take on a broader life perspective. Pursuing and focusing on activities and purposes that really help all of us, make the meaning of life, or make meaning of our lives. And what kind of encourages us to go from integration to transcendence is living and aging and really having a greater sense of who we are, accumulating wisdom as we are getting older and learning more about the world and meeting more people. And this is what I'd like us to kind of learn today together. How do we truly embrace our transcendence? What is the best way for us to be successfully aging? I'm going to just take a pause. I don't know. I see that there's some chat questions. I don't know if people are just introducing themselves or if there's any comments or questions just yet.
I think it looks like mostly introductions so far.
Okay. So how do we achieve transcendence? How do we successfully age? The science of successful aging is steadily growing. I was looking at the history in preparation for this talk, and it's a very interesting history. One of the first ways that researchers or scientists approach successful aging is they took a group of people and then they just kind of split them or categorize them into archetypes. And basically they identified 5 general archetypes or essentially like personality types. They called these the mature, the rocking chair, the armored, and then the angry man and the self-hater. Can you imagine which groups were viewed as not successfully aging? Yeah, so the groups that were categorized as the angry man and self-haters were viewed as not being successful aging. But that was really only looking at a group of men and really only looking at a group of white men in one point of time. Since then, successful aging has tried to evolve or is trying to evolve to be more all-encompassing. And probably the next big model of successful aging after that original archetype model is Rowan Kahn's successful aging model. So what they said is, hey, successful aging is more complex than just a personality. It has to do with, whether or not people are still engaging in life, whether or not they have any medical conditions or disease or disability, and how well they're actually maintaining their physical and cognitive function. And their view of successful aging is essentially, the absence of disease. So optimizing engagement, being as physically and cognitively functional as possible, and totally minimizing disease. And for a long time, that was thought to be the ideal of successful aging. But, what is missing there, besides that ideal being completely difficult to achieve for the large majority of people in the world, it really doesn't consider what matters most to the individual. So this is a general view of successful aging, but it is not individualized at all. So the next model that kind of followed that is what they call the selective optimization and compensation model, or SOC. And this model does acknowledge that, we all have differences, we're individuals and there are natural changes over the lifespan. Some of these things we are not able to control or change, maybe related to genetics or other situational things. And it's not realistic to say that all of us are going to be able to go through life without any disease and optimization of engagement and physical and cognitive function. So what the SOC model really talks about is, so essentially people kind of choose, people have preferences, people, say some person wants to be physically active and that is what their view of successful aging is. They might opt for that and maybe, not do so much socialization or not put as much effort into more like mental health and really just kind of work on physical function and that gets optimized. And then, all the other stuff is kind of compensated, but they're still pursuing their view of what it is to successfully age, and they're achieving what they want out of their life. And I think that's currently the reigning model of successful aging. But I want to propose one more. So this is all, and really this is all biomedical aging. So this is really looking at health span and lifespan. In the context of HIV, I personally think what works best is the biopsychosocial, because it's more than just biology. I mean, I think we all can admit and recognize that, our quality of life depends on more than just whether or not we're living really long and are living really healthy. There are so many other things that can contribute to that. So the biopsychosocial model of successful aging is sort of broken up into a couple of different pieces. So one, it recognizes that, we all have individual dispositions that I might prefer to be cognitively engaged rather than just running a marathon. That might be my preference. That's my personal disposition. And most of the time that personal disposition doesn't change a lot. It's fairly stable. On the other hand, what I really like about this model is it also acknowledges that, we live in a world where there are some things that are out of our control, and there are cultural things that impact how successful we can be in pursuing our different goals. So it does acknowledge that there are social and structural constraints that may impact our abilities to successfully age. So stereotypes, I think, is one example. And we're going to talk a lot about stigma and intersectionality in this talk. And this is kind of my first point in bringing it up. But really, despite having those fairly fixed things, we can still work towards achieving our goals. So I think what's similar to the SOC model with the biopsychosocial model is that we still choose, what matters most to us. And we still pursue activities that help us to kind of get to our own subjective well-being, not somebody else's idea of well-being. So this is kind of the starting point. I mentioned all that just to kind of give people the background of what successful aging is. There's lots, I would tell you, if you get into a conversation with someone who is an expert in successful aging, there will be lots and lots of discussion about what's the best approach. But personally, as a person-centered physician, I like person-centered successful aging. I like models that really embrace that. Any comments, any thoughts? Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So I do want to stop here for a second and hear from you all before I kind of talk more. What is your definition of successful aging? What do you want to achieve to feel like you're successfully aging, or what have you achieved to know that you are successfully aging? Patrick, I see your hands raised.
Hi, I really am a believer. I'm already loving the angle you're taking with this. I am a believer that equally as important as your physical health is your mental health and how you can incorporate living with HIV. I've been living with HIV since 1996, and I'm grateful to be along what they call a long-term non-progressor or what have you for some reason. But I also early on said to myself that this was not the way I was going to check out. I right from my diagnosis, I said, no, this is not for me. Heart disease runs in my family. I'm going to die of a heart attack. So I think having a positive mental attitude has really helped me stay healthy. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
I love that. Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Hello, my name is Jessie, and I have been HIV positive since 1987. I got it when I was 14 years old from a blood transfusion. And unfortunately, I'm having all the aging problems way before I turned 50 in April. Now, I've already got diabetes, high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, kidney disease.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I just found out that I got glaucoma in my right eye. But I'm a survivor. I keep a positive attitude. I like to share something. When I had my neck broke twice. Okay, the first time I had it broke, me and one of my church members asked my nurse, and so she came in and we got on our knees and prayed. I was laying in bed about an hour later and just thinking about it, and all of a sudden the room got super bright. Now, I don't know if it's a dream or if it's a vision. I can't say, but I know what I saw. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it was Jesus at the top and Satan was at the bottom. And they were arguing over my soul. And Satan said he wanted he wanted my soul. And Jesus said, you can't have her. We got special plans for her. Mm-hmm. He said, well, I'm going to make her, Satan said, I'm going to make her life a living hell. And he has. I have been to hell and back, but I'm still living, But Jesus told me that whatever comes in my way, I'm going to overcome it. And I have. Yeah. I have overcome so much stuff, mentally, physically, health-wise, life situations. I'm a survivor, honey. I'm a warrior. I've been positive for 36 years now? So, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and hold that thought, because I think I'm going to give you a little bit of data that might validate what you're saying in a bit. Okay. So if we apply the biopsychosocial model of successful aging to HIV, it sort of breaks it up into a whole bunch of pieces, from longevity, length of life, biologic health, cognitive efficiency, mental health, social competence, productivity, personal control, and ultimately life satisfaction. And in truth, every single one of these topics is literally a whole talk in itself. So I apologize, but you're just going to get a bird's eye view today. Otherwise, we're going to be here for like 6 hours. And maybe, you know, if any of you are interested in exploring these topics in the future, you know, like bring them up, and if I can't do it, we'll find somebody else. That's a wonderful speaker to also come and give you guys a talk on one of these areas. So I'll start with talking about how to optimize our biologic health. So our longevity and our lack of disease, or at least as much as possible. How many of you have heard of the blue zones? Can people put their hands up? Has anyone heard of the blue zones before? I'm not seeing any hands, but I don't know. Okay, well, so the blue zones are geographic areas across the world that are the birthplace of significantly higher number of centenarians or 100 years old than anywhere else in the world, or even in the surrounding areas. And the first identified blue zone was in Sardinia. Others, though, have since been identified, and they also include Ikaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda in California. Can anyone tell me what Loma Linda is known for? Sorry, I can't see any chats. But so Loma Linda is essentially a town or a city that tends to have a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventists. So the interesting thing about these blue zones is that we know that only about 20% of our lifespan is actually impacted by genetics. So researchers and scientists have studied these communities to try to identify what is it about these communities, what are the habits that they have, is there anything that they have in common, you know, that could contribute to their unexpected or statistically significantly higher longevity. And they have identified what they call the Power 9. This is kind of corny, but it's an easy way to remember it. And I really wanted to share this with you all today, if you've not heard about it before. So the Power 9 basically means that people in these communities, they tend to move naturally, meaning they're not spending a whole bunch of their time in the gym, but their environment is such that it kind of nudges them naturally or you know, just easily to get moving, to work with their bodies. For example, like there's a lot of gardening in these communities, and they don't have a lot of kind of tools that are electronic tools to do it. So a lot of these things are hand gardening. A lot of these places have cliffs or hills that require lots of walking up and down, not so many cars and things of that sort. So they move very naturally. People in these communities also tend to have a sense of purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning. And that's in a study been quantified to equate an additional 7 years. If you have a sense of purpose, it's an additional 7 years to your lifespan. All of them downshift to manage stress. They all have adapted ways, albeit some are a little bit different than others, to really decrease their stress. They do experience stress, but they do different things. So for example, the Okinawans spend time every day kind of in reflection, remembering and honoring their ancestors. The Seventh-day Adventists, you know, pray. Faith and religion is a big part in many of these communities. Icarians take naps, and Sardinians have happy hour, you know, but their happy hour is more than just going out for cheap alcohol. It's much more celebrating, you know, the day with family. They have an 80% rule of eating, meaning that they stop eating when their stomachs are about 80% full, not all the way. And other blue zoners tend to eat their smallest meal in the late afternoon or in the evening, and then they do not eat again for the rest of the evening. So they really do try to minimize what they're eating later in the day. Most of them predominantly eat vegetarian, and those that do eat protein, if they are eating beans is really the primary protein, but if they are eating meat, it's rare. So it's like 4 or 5 times a month, not on a regular basis, not multiple times a week. Many of them, you know, except for the Adventists, drink moderate amounts of alcohol. This is an area where we will revisit in a little bit, but because I disagree a little bit about this observation, but it is there, and it has been thought to also contribute to the lifespan. They all belong to some sort of community, and usually it's a faith-based community. So the Adventists, clearly, that's their faith-based community. The Okinawans also practice a different type of faith. that is separate from what the rest of Japan practices and so on. They tend to value family and other loved ones first. The folks that live in the blue zone often live very close to their children, their parents, their grandparents, and it really is, a really tight-knit family community. And then lastly, they have the right tribe. And what that means is that they kind of grow up with a group of people that have similar values that reinforce, ongoing healthy behaviors, including all the way into their later life. So these very environmental health practices have been deemed to be ideal to age well. And you guys might say, well, those studies are just observations. It's just comparisons. It's not empiric. It's not like they did an intervention. It wasn't randomized. How do we know this stuff is actually going to work? Why should we adapt it? So they've interestingly tried to adapt it into other communities. So the Alberta Lee, Minnesota experiment, this is just a picture of the town, did actually attempt to incorporate some of these principles into their city. So they added walking paths, they connected sidewalks, they actually created a walking path that goes all the way around the lake. So people would be encouraged to naturally move and naturally walk. They got commitments from grocery stores, restaurants, and schools to serve healthy food choices, or at least highlight those as like a priority over less healthy foods. And 25% of the community signed a pledge saying that they were going to choose healthier options and choose to be more active. A year and a half later, Alberta Lee experienced a 3-point-year bump in life expectancy. Their community lost a combined weight of 7,280 pounds, and healthcare costs dropped by 40%. So they were seeming to be healthier in general. And I think that this community of people, they've tried to implement the Power 9 in other communities. Some have been less successful than Alberta Lee. Alberta Lee is a small town. I think it's only like 9,000 people. And they were more successful than others. But this is an example that, making some of these changes does seem to be able to affect your health. And if that's not enough to convince you, there are actually two lifestyle change programs that have lots and lots and lots of evidence for the benefit of moving more, eating healthier, and connecting with others. So I think most of you might be familiar with the diabetes prevention program. It's covered by insurance. It's widely available, or should be widely available across the country. The CDC recommends people pursue this. It's essentially a year-long program that focuses on healthy eating and getting enough physical activity. It's 150 minutes per week, not exclamation point. The CDC provides education and handouts, but they also assign people a lifestyle coach so that they have someone to kind of encourage them to be making these lifestyle changes, and a group so that people can do this together. So they get a lifestyle coach and a support group as they're changing their behaviors. And the diabetes prevention program works. So it cuts the risk of diabetes by 58%. That actually is outcompeting starting metformin. So I don't know if any of you have been diagnosed with prediabetes, your doctor put you on metformin. The diabetes prevention plan works better, and it continues to work better as years and years and years go by. There's still a higher percentage of folks that do not progress to diabetes that are on the diabetes prevention program versus randomized to metformin. So this program works. Other benefits seen is it improves cholesterol, it improves your blood pressure. Now, the other lifestyle change program that is also approved and covered by health insurance is the Ornish program for reversing heart disease. This program is very similar to the Power 9. So vegan, low-fat diet, exercise, and essentially as much as you can do, empathetic group support, and stress management. So what they've adapted for stress management, instead of having people pray or be a part of a religious community, is for everyone to incorporate daily mindful meditation into their habits. And there's lots of evidence that this has been very effective. So literally, if you look at the research from the Ornish program, they have pictures of atherosclerotic plaques that melt away on this program. Heart function improves, cholesterol improves, blood pressure decreases, kind of similar to what they saw in the diabetes prevention plan. the person who kind of created this program, Ornish, also thought that, he's like, well, since it works so well for heart, let's look at other outcomes. So they've looked at diabetes. It also it causes, or it benefits them at that as well. People can use less medications if they have diabetes. And she's looked at aging and noticed some telomere length increases in people who are going through this program. So it does seem to impact some of these biomarkers of aging as well. Cancer, the only cancer they looked at is prostate cancer. It didn't cure it, but it seemed to slow its progression compared to people that were not randomized to this intervention. And then depression, a large proportion of people who entered this program with depression became non-depressed. So lots and lots of benefits of lifestyle changes. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second before we go on to talking about the brain. Anyone have thoughts or comments about that?
Yes. Okay. I mean, I'm doing the best because like I said, I have heart disease, I have high blood pressure, kidney disease, diabetes, and each one of them's got different diets.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. It's really hard to figure out which ones I can do. So
yeah, no, so I will be fair. I will fairly say that the Ornish program diet does have a lot of carbohydrates. So sometimes it is difficult to find the right diet if you have both diabetes and heart disease.
yeah,
Usually what I would recommend is whichever one is worse or primary.
the heart disease is worse because August 16th I had a valve replacement.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay. Well, maybe we could talk a little bit more. But
okay.
Melanie, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yes, I am in the CDC diabetes prevention program, and I enjoy the group process and the tracking. In my particular group, I have lost the most weight, not just following, it's because I'm the one, I haven't disclosed my status, but they know I have health issues. They do not know I have HIV. They don't know that I have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They don't know that I have a congenital heart a defect. And so what I'm asking, the results of these tests, of these studies, were any of these people HIV positive?
So surely yes, but not enough to actually stratify them out.
Okay, because some of our medications that we take put us in jeopardy of diabetes, put us in jeopardy of cardiovascular disease, and part of the being chronically ill, even if it's managed, depression or things that impact like anxiety and I don't know, my exercise time, I never made it to the 150 or the 180 because I have other physical disabilities that prevent me from doing exercise at the levels that I can get to those. Plus, I had COVID, and I still experience some of the symptoms. So I'm a long hauler or have long COVID or whatever you want to talk about it. So I have all these things, and I have purpose. I find myself happy, but hearing this stuff doesn't, it just seems like from what you saw in a previous that, oh, why do we always have to hear about bad things? You went to the opposite side and talk about
all the good things. Yeah.
all the good things that's in the era that we are living now. there's not enough that the government, like CDC, SAMHSA, HRSA, HRSA-HAB, HHS, all those people are not addressing aging with HIV. From if you are vertical and under 40, if you're 50, the aging community doesn't recognize aging until 65.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
You say that geriatricians are going to be a regular part of our healthcare. They don't know jack, most of them, about HIV.
Not yet, but we're working to
Oh,
change that.
okay, but see, not yet. Okay, I'm 70 years old. I
Yeah,
want to live to
I
be
hear
at
you.
least 100 or more.
I
But
would like that too.
this is taking so much time. You know, the Ryan White program is not designed for those of us who are aging with HIV. It was designed because it has not been reauthorized since it was declared a manageable chronic disease. So it's still heavy on treatment and care, but not for aging things. I need orthotics. I need this. I need that. And it doesn't cover those items. Okay. So that needs to be dismantled and redone so that it care. Most of us are over 50 who are living with HIV. So the Ryan White program is not designed to keep us at optimum health.
No, I
So I'm
agree.
just saying this seems like utopia. And sure, we would want utopia, but in the world we are living today, the political realities, the criminalization of HIV, all the things that are impacting people who want to do right, live well. The stigma is crushing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm happy-go-lucky. However, I do see what's going on in this world. And I know, being a Black woman, an older woman, I have all these isms that are against me, that I am always swimming against the current, and I have to exist in that. And I know I'm not the only one. I'll be quiet because I can go on, like you said before, on and on and on. Okay.
I see there's a couple hands up. Jules and Avilio, do you mind waiting? I just want to get through a couple more slides. I suspect that.
No,
we-
I have to get off. I have to get off. I just
Oh,
want
okay,
to
okay, go, Jules. Go.
I just want to say, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to be a killjoy. But I put it in early in your talk. This is totally unrealistic, Mary. I'm sorry. I agree with everything I think that was Melanie said. She's 150% right. First of all, people with HIV don't fall into the same groups as Loma Lima.
True.
I know all about Loma Linda. I know all about the Hornish diet, all those groups. They don't apply to us. We experience accelerated aging. We have multiple comorbidities. We have these diseases that all these other people don't have. So you can't say what they do applies to us at all. Now, having said that, I agree with you 100%. We all should be trying to do exercise. We all should be trying to have a good diet. We should all try to have social engagement, except people with HIV, to do all that is swimming against the current. We all suffer fatigue. As Melanie just said, we've been taking these drugs, which cause all these toxicities that no one really knows about, but I know, because these drugs cause cognitive impairment, they cause fatigue, they cause diabetes, they cause heart disease. So we've had to deal with this for 30 years. So we are nothing like the people in Sardinia.
Yes, yes. And I didn't mean to imply that, Jules, but thank you. I agree with you. You know, I think I meant to encourage people to move. but
I appreciate that.
I understand.
But it has to be done in the context of us and our community.
Oh,
And
you
it's
know,
just-
we've tried, you know, Jules, that we have tried to.
Well,
get some of
that's
this-
part of the problem. Listen, that part, and I'll end with this. Part of the problem is that many of us have been talking and educating how we need to exercise more and eat better. And frankly, a lot of it gets completely lost on the community. They don't listen to us, but there's a good reason they don't listen, because it's very hard to exercise when you're dealing with lifetime fatigue and cognitive impairment and all these other issues that Melanie is 100%. The Ryan White Care Act and the federal government is not giving us any support. They've ruined people with aging with HIV. They're not addressing our issues. They've ignored us. And so they've left us to deal with all this with, a discussion like this. It's
Yeah.
really horrible what they've done to us.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think what was really exciting to me, sorry, we're going a little bit offline here, folks. We're trying to build this new implementation science network because that's where the gap is. Like we know all these things work, but how do we actually help people to achieve that? Melanie knows, I think other people on this call know that most of my grants are really focused in trying to get these programs into people who need them that don't have access to it right now. But unfortunately, all the implementation science money right now is focused on ending the HIV epidemic. And I'm wondering who we need to talk to actually get it focused on aging. The NIA is not interested right now, although maybe we should get together and really talk about like what could we put together that might be, this implementation program for at least brain aging, because then the NIA might be interested in that. But yeah, no, I agree 100% to everybody. Sorry, this experiment of being positive failed. And it really didn't mean to make people feel bad. But let's see if we can keep moving forward. And please continue to comment and provide feedback. I'm going to skip this slide. Basically, this is just saying more of the same, that similar to longevity, the aging brain really is impacted by multiple things. With HIV brain pathology, and like Joel said, some of our antiretroviral therapy has certainly contributed to some of the cognitive impairment that's experienced by people who are living with HIV. But also social and education factors and comorbidities are contributing to that. And what this basically is a graph that was in a study that was done a while ago that showed that in the pre-CART era versus the post-CART era, there's actually observed increases in people that have cognitive impairment, particularly folks that are not that sick in the CDC area grouping. And what this study originally did not consider is, why? Why are we seeing more cognitive impairment when we actually have these medicines? Jules mentioned, yes, there are some toxicities for sure. We don't know yet, though, which ones are best to protect the brain. So that's work that's ongoing. I am not an expert in that, but it is something I think that many people are looking into and trying a problem that we are trying to solve. But the other reason that maybe we saw more cognitive impairment in the post-ART era is because people were living and acquiring comorbidities. So this study by Ron Ellis just a couple of years ago really shows that when you're looking at neurocognitive impairment trajectories, so this is not just one point in time, this is following people living with HIV over time and looking at who progresses or who is developing more neurocognitive impairment and who is not. Having multiple medical conditions, or this essentially the Charlson Comorbidity Score is a combination of different medical conditions, is the highest association with progressive cognitive impairment. But it also, this group also put another study out looking at medications. So we prescribe a lot of medications that we think are well-meaning. So things like benzodiazepines, pain medications that unfortunately also impair cognition to some degree. So this paper looked at those types of medications. So I think it was benzos, antipsychotics, I think maybe antihistamines and opioids, and looked to see like people who were on these combinations of medications, how did it impact their ability to think? And as you can see here, the non-polypharmacy versus the polypharmacy shows that having those excess medications on board does actually impair in almost every aspect of cognition. And the reason that I show this is not really to bum people out, but to kind of introduce a new idea of deprescription. So many people living with HIV were told in the beginning, you have to take all your medications all the time if you want to live. And they've applied that to other things. You know, they're like, this is what my doctor's prescribing me. I have to take it all the time, you know, if I want to be healthy, if I want to live. But there is a point, and there are some medications where we do need to really carefully consider, is this actually helping you? Or are you ultimately being hurt by this medication? And I strongly recommend that everyone, if you are on a lot of medications and you're not sure, especially if you're on medications that are for more symptoms, like pain or anxiety or itchiness, you know, maybe just have a conversation with your doctor and your local clinic pharmacist and say, hey, do I need to be on all of these? You know, do you think that there's anything on here? Are there alternates that I could take? Is there anything here that maybe we can try to take off moving forward? Okay, so cognition, though, is so much more than that. And Melanie and Jules, I'm very thankful that you brought up this idea of stigma, because it really is at the center of so many things when you're living with HIV. And this model of cognition essentially demonstrates that stigma, not just you know, the experience of stigma or discrimination against me, but stigma that's anticipated. So I see this a lot in my patients that I have to send to the ER. They don't want to go there because they're worried that the doctor in the ER is going to say something that's like super offensive or assume that they're using drugs just because they're living with HIV. It may not be the experience, but unfortunately, because of the experience discrimination already, they fear that that's something that's going to happen to them. And lots of people living with HIV also kind of internalize their HIV stigma. And they kind of feel bad that you know, they got it in the first place, or you know, they've kind of internalized what other people that they love have said to them in response to hearing that they have an HIV diagnosis. And all of that really hurts, you know, and contributes to things like stress and anxiety, depression, and stigma itself will impact how people perform on a cognitive test. So even in the absence of cognitive impairment, depression, or anxiety, the experiences that you have had and the struggles of that will also impact that. So
isn't it a compounding effect?
yes.
And there is a biological effect to this, that the brain does experience inflammation when you are HIV positive, and the inflammation is a cause of some of these mental health disorders. And stigma is just a compounding effect of it.
Yes. Yes. That's what this, yes, that's exactly what this shows. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? So I'm going to briefly also just toss this one in. So loneliness is it too. You know, so social isolation, not talking to people, you know, being very isolated, and experiencing loneliness also contributes to cognitive impairment, as well as a whole bunch of other negative outcomes. And I always throw this slide in because loneliness is really close to my heart. I don't want any of the people that I care for to be lonely. You know, there are a couple of my patients that really struggle because of social anxiety or other issues like disabilities and mobility issues, that struggle with connecting, you know, outside of the clinic. And some of our patients come to clinic to be cared for and to feel valued. And, you know, it's something I love to do for our folks, but I kind of wish I didn't have to be the place that, you know, is where they felt valued and not alone anymore. But anyway, so briefly mentioning the ILTS endemic, I know that I had said what part of the Power 9 is wine, but we we meaning the HIV research community, has recently identified that the combination of HIV aging and substance use, including tobacco and alcohol, is actually pretty detrimental to aging. Maybe that's not a big surprise to most people. And contributes to things like falls and frailty. And so some of us, including me, recommend, you know, you can use alcohol and tobacco periodically, but I really do work with a lot of my folks to try to see if we can get them off everything completely. So to optimize brain health, really, you know, like with the HIV part of it, we want to aim for 100% adherence. I'll say that the community is still working on trying to figure out what are the safest medications to use so that we don't continue to cause toxicity. Comorbidities, prioritize management of it. Don't forget to actually address those. I have a couple of folks that like, I just decided I was not going to ignore my diabetes for a little while. That usually doesn't result in a positive outcome. So I know it's exhausting to like think about all of these medical conditions, but it is important to try to keep on top of it as much as possible. Evaluate your medications routinely. Do you really need all these medicines? If you do experience depression, anxiety, stigma, and other conditions, really seek out care. There are approaches beyond medicine for some of these, although I will say that access to therapy and skills building is very, very difficult to get. In fact, if you can't pay for it out of pocket, it almost has to be provided in the context of a research study. And we really need more of that and a lot of innovation in this space. Continue to pursue meaningful social interactions and minimize substance use as best as possible. Okay. So talk to your doctor about these and they'll help you out. So I'm going to move into social capital, but before I do, I don't know if there's any other concerns. I don't want people to feel too discouraged here. I'm feeling like the room is just feeling discouraged now. Any comments, any thoughts?
Miley, this
Yes.
is Alistair.
Hi.
Hi there, and I'm enjoying and learning from the talk and from the questions and answers. One of the things that I am not seeing that I haven't worked out how to encourage more is to lead people to where they can differentiate between isolation and loneliness.
Yeah.
COVID has enforced all sorts of isolation, and people have thrived during COVID because they have accepted that the isolation does happen and they're going to do something about it, or we're going to do something about it. And they do, and that effectively undoes the potential damage that the isolation could have caused. But I know that in a support group that I facilitate, in talking to lots of people who are positive like myself, the isolation is something that came on gradually, and nothing triggered the individuals to actually seek out other people in similar situations or whatever. Some people are, I think in the comment I saw someone saying we don't have the support groups that we used to have.
Yeah.
But a large part of that is because with the success of the support groups, people dropped out thinking they were fine because they were at the time, and then haven't come back into it when isolation reared its head. And one of the things I put in the chat was, I don't understand why in this country there isn't more of an emphasis on passions, pursuing hobbies and interests, because as far as I can tell, everyone has one or more passions that at the drop of the hat, we can talk about them for hours, and we're animated, and it's almost a useful form of exercise when one is indulging one's passion, as long as it's a healthy passion and not harming other people. And yeah, I wish we could see more of that happening, because I know that it's been key for a lot of people who are older and who are afraid of technology. It's amazing how many people will start to use a laptop or a smartphone or a computer when they realize they can do crossword puzzles on it. They can actually learn more about knitting. They can learn more about gardening. They can connect with other people who share the same levels of passion. And that almost gives its own mindfulness benefit, where prior to that, people were feeling isolated, sitting at home, and basically thinking, oh, I'll never date anyone again. And yet a lot of the people that go to pursue their passions without particularly thinking about dating find a like-minded individual who becomes a partner and potentially a life partner. And for some reason, that pathway doesn't seem to be thought about within the community. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I think I'm only guessing here. I mean, I do think that because, especially for, long-term progressors, people that are leaders, in the community who are feeling exhausted because they keep saying, look, these are problems we're having and you guys are not helping us. Like I know Jules and whatnot. It's exhausting. That is a job in itself. And I think there is such urgency there, but I hate to speak for anybody. I can speak for myself. For me personally, I'm incredibly passionate about policy. I'm incredibly passionate about change. In a world where, physicians are really experiencing a lot of moral injury because we see that our system really cares more about profit than actually helping people. This is how I keep myself sane, is trying to make change and trying to improve, even though it could be just something small, like having a conversation with a funder that maybe might sway them one way or the other to fund one study or not. But I do think it's a full-time job to be an advocate, and it's hard. I also think that, and again, this is just from observations that I have with the people that I'm caring for. I think folks that have a lot of comorbidity, they don't feel well. And even though they might be passionate about something, it takes a lot. I mean, I actually saw someone today that he was doing really poorly, didn't want to go on dialysis, really feared having to do that. And we finally kind of forced him to because he got sick enough that he needed to do it. And I told him, just try it. If you hate it, you don't have to do it forever. And it's changed his life. He feels so much better, and one of the things, and he was one of my most isolated patients. So he, just because he wasn't feeling well, really didn't get to go out of the house and whatnot. And similarly, had lost a large amount of his friends in the 80s and 90s and kind of didn't go back to work, so didn't rebuild that community. But he told me recently that one of the things he always loved to do when he was healthier was to kind of like go and hang out with people that were unstably housed, talking to them about their lives, learning about them, validating them. And he said, now that I'm in dialysis, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. He's like, I think I want to do that again. And then he said, give me all the vaccinations, because I don't want to get sick, with like as I'm interacting with more people. So I do think there are things that we, like as physicians can do to help people get there, but it's often hard to start. So I'll bring in loneliness, because I agree with you. There is a difference between social isolation and loneliness. So you can be socially isolated and not lonely. Meaning you could be very, not have much interaction with people, but be very happy and feel fulfilled in that. And you can be lonely and be in a room with crowded people. So they're two different ideas. That being said, the research seems to suggest that they're both not always beneficial. So folks that are socially isolated, because they have less village around them per se, are a little bit more at risk for complications, medical complications, because they don't have a little bit more help. And then loneliness, like people who are lonely tend not to seek help because they kind of are fearing others around them. So when people are really lonely, sorry, this is a totally different talk, people, I apologize. They tend to start being suspicious of others, and that's believed to be an evolutionary response. If you're normally in a tribe of people, you're kind of protected by the tribe. But if you're out alone by yourself, whether it's social isolation or loneliness, you need to be a little bit hypervigilant. And particularly in people who are lonely, they've shown that they do tend to be a lot more hypervigilant. When you're hypervigilant, you have more stress and more inflammation. And it's one of the reasons that people believe that loneliness is essentially equates to like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, as it turns out, related to future comorbidity and things of that sort. So I think it's complex, but I think, we as friends, we as advocates, we as physicians can encourage people to do that. So I do lots of social prescriptions, and I have a lot of older adults that are a handful that are just kind of tired of the community. And I've encouraged them, go, like one of my patients recently, he's an artist, and he's like, I'm feeling like kind of like there's nowhere in the community for me. So I told him, go be a docent at our, Museum of Art, go volunteer, go meet that community. Lots of people with similar interests, you don't have to tell them that you're living with HIV. And he started looking into it, and he started doing it, and he's having a good time.
That's the sort of thing that I try to encourage. It can be something as simple as taking a stained glass class.
Yeah.
Or going to a local gardening club that has a community garden and trying that, joining in something musical, Learning a musical instrument usually needs some form of teacher for it to do well, but that can be a good way. There are all sorts of things that are available, but a lot of the culture at the moment is conditioning us to shut down and pull back as we get older. And not as many people are learning that we have control of our own lives to the extent that if life seems to be throwing lemons at us, we can choose whether or not we make the lemonade. But a lot of people don't even think of making lemonade when life throws lemons at us.
Yeah.
The more we can encourage that, the better. Thank
I will also just make a quick comment, and again, I apologize to everybody else. Hopefully people are getting something out of this conversation. So you sound like you're not originally from the US. I believe that one of the reasons that I think we struggle is with connecting with others, particularly in the US. I'll just go back a little bit more. Is that we have this culture that really values, so there's two things. It values productivity, which means work, like how are you making money for people? And it values individualism, meaning you don't ask for help, you do everything on your own. And I actually think both of those two values are very harmful for us as a community of people, not just people living with HIV. Because we're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to do it all on our own. I mean, I'm in medicine. That was the messaging that I was told. You ask for help, you're weak. Like, you can't ask for help. You got to do it all on your own. And look at what's happened to our industry. There's burnout galore because people are just struggling, to try to meet a metric like that.
Yes, one of the things that I have introduced as a concept to a lot of people over here. I was originally born in Scotland, so yes. But I've been over here since I've been down in the States since December of '79. So I've been here a long time. I think most of us, or possibly all of us, believe that it's better to give than to receive.
Yeah.
However, for that to work, there have to be some poor schmoes willing to receive.
Yep.
And if one asks for help and receives help, one doesn't have to just leave it at that. Once one gets better or recovers, or again has full ability to go through life, we then have the opportunity to share that and pass it on to others to help others. And one of the things that we can actually do that is a very small thing is ask somebody for really small items of help. All the way from, could you pass me this please, to a complete stranger in a store, or in a parking lot, say, can you tell me how I get to directions to a place? It's a very small help that the person can give, but it's amazing the look on the person's face when they feel they're helping.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because they get something out of helping somebody else. And it hasn't cost us anything to make that opportunity for someone else to help.
I agree. I'm going to talk briefly about this one graph here on this slide, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about this topic that we're already discussing. So basically, I have a bunch of slides that show you it's good for you to be social. It's good for you to interact with other humans, and we've kind of already had that discussion in a more higher level. But this particular study, this study was not done in people living with HIV. It's actually a colleague of mine who's a geriatrician. We both love loneliness. That's how we got to know each other. Or we both love the idea of helping to fix loneliness. He actually implemented a study where they had peers, that were assigned to isolated and lonely older adults that had similar interests. So just like you're talking about, they found a peer, and one or two other older adults that had similar interests, and they basically encouraged them, to originally just go do some house visits, make some phone calls, kind of like gently engage them, talk about the things that you like. And they found that over time, the relationships really began to thrive. And here, are the results of that intervention. Loneliness went down, barriers to engagement went down, social interaction went up, so mood got better. Transportation was kind of like also resolved because these peers were also helping people to kind of get out of the house and go to places that they couldn't get to otherwise, and depression decreased. So as I was reading the study, it reminded me a lot does it sound familiar to anybody where a buddy or a peer is going and helping out another? Does that sound familiar to any of our folks in the community? Anybody want to speak out and if they have the answer? So it sounds.
I know, back when I first got HIV, National Cares had a buddy system where they would get somebody to come in to, you know, repair you with volunteers or whatever, where they could come take you places or just hang out with you, help you with housework, whatever, you know. And I had one buddy that Hallie, and she was a buddy for about 3 years, and then they stopped the program. But me and Hallie still keep in touch to this day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The buddy system, you know, like, and
I wish they'd bring it back, really.
that was an original HIV-ish, you know, like idea. And it has been adapted now to older adults. I don't know if Jeff Taylor's on the call, but he told me that they tried to like redo the buddy system recently, kind of to address some of the isolation and loneliness of older adults. And a whole bunch of people signed up to be a buddy or a peer, but nobody signed up for one, you know, to be the person that peer was helping. And that's really, I think, consistent with this conversation that we've been having, and also consistent with intersectionality. Now, Melanie mentioned, you know, in the beginning, that she's living with HIV, she's a Black woman, you know, she's got all of these intersecting stigmas that negatively impact her in multiple ways. And you know, what we haven't talked about yet is number one, how that impacts a person's ability to actually engage in some of these positive behaviors and activities that we're talking about. But also, you know, we haven't talked about how some people are not able to do it because they don't have the means. So social disparities of health particularly impact older adults with HIV. I mean, I have so many folks that really struggle with even getting, you know, their bills paid every month. Some people don't have enough money to eat the last week of the month. And we're constantly, you know, trying to find and connect them with resources so that they can just make it through. That is something that, you know, medicine is actually finally interested in trying to change. And I'm really hoping, and so is the NIH. The NIH has also been looking at, like, how can we address some of these social disparities of health so that we can have more equity and people have the ability, the time, the energy, the money, the transportation to actually go out and do something they enjoy, or go out and make new friends, or go out and exercise, or eat healthier. Because really, at the end of the day, it's that combination of, you know, just financial ability and all of these complicated intersectionalities that drive, you know, so much of our behaviors that are the most difficult thing to overcome. Melanie, I hope that I don't know if she's still here, but if you're still here, I hope that you feel heard.
Miley, I just wanted to flag, this is Heather. I just wanted to flag that we are over time right now. So I don't know if you wanted to take one or two more questions. And if anyone would like to reach out to Miley or has additional questions, feel free. I will send a follow-up email tomorrow with this recording, and I'll include the slides. Feel free to respond with those questions, and I will make sure that I get them to Miley so that you can be heard.
Thanks, Heather. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. No worries. Thank you. It's a great conversation.
This is my slide on generativity, Alistair. But yes, you know, I think it's beautiful. It's wonderful. We'll have to have more conversations. All right. I apologize. Stephen, you have your hand raised.
I do. I just so everybody knows, I mean, we're going into territory that we've not been in before. You know, we know in this country, 50% of people affected by HIV are now over the age of 50. And this is a conversation that we need to really start having. And our local consortium is beginning to have this conversation, as well as the state level here in Florida is beginning to have this conversation. I think this was a great talk. Thank you for the presentation. And we are aging, and I think we just got to stay engaged in this conversation. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Any other last thoughts, I guess, or I think people are feel free to leave. Sorry, I went over. But I'm also
Valerie, I did feel that I was heard. And I appreciate that.
If anybody wants to chat, I don't know if Rock for Ages could stay on, but I have a little bit of time if anybody wants to talk further, if anybody wants to give me ideas for research or let me know who I need to talk to kind of or who I need to be engaging to get things to move forward for y'all.
Can you with one of the doctors that was presenting here for one of the aging project groups that was here in Houston? And I was asking them if the medical community has ever thought about adjusting their lab ranges for people with HIV, because, you know, of course, it's all about prevention and early detection and trying to prevent, you know, future, you know, cholesterol or diabetes and all that stuff. But shouldn't we be adapting our ranges in the labs so that way we can address those issues a lot more sooner? Because I just feel like those ranges are just for the normal person. It's not really applicable to me, you know?
I hear you. Actually, so there is discussion around that. I think probably where we're seeing that most is in cardiology. You know, so we haven't yet incorporated HIV into a model of risk, but what I will say is what people are doing in practice is, you know, I don't know if you guys have yet had your doctor tell you about your ASCVD score, your cardiovascular atherosclerosis cardiovascular risk disease score. You know, we do these now in everybody once they hit a certain age. It calculates, you know, what your future risk of having a heart attack or a stroke is within the next 10 years. There is a cutoff point in which we would say, okay, your risk is now 7%. I think at this point, it's beneficial to put you on like a medication to prevent this from happening. Some people with, so some cardiologists and some physicians who care for HIV will actually start that sooner. Especially if, you know, that they know that somebody has like a very extensive smoking history or another risk factor that they think is underrepresented within that model. But not everybody. It's not been studied, you know, whether or not there's that benefit. But I do think, you know, the REPRIEVE study from the ACTG evaluated putting people on pitavastatin or cholesterol medication who did not meet that criteria. And data is still coming out on whether or not, you know, we need to be putting, you know, everybody that meets some sort of risk criteria on a statin before they even get to the point where it would flag per the cardiologist. So we are trying to do some of that work. But I agree, you know, I think doctors in general, you know, we're reactive. We don't do a really good job with prevention. But, you know, infectious disease is probably one of the best, you know, at least we're comfortable and we understand what that means.
I think it's sometimes I feel sorry for my HIV doctor because we were expecting him to look at everything and not just manage my HIV, but manage my cholesterol, manage my sugars, manage everything else. And then it's like, and I think I think it's good because he's looking at the big picture and I'm not going to another specialist for something. But I mean, I think it's also, I mean, I feel very sympathetic with my doctor sometimes because I'm a bad patient.
Well, see now, you know, I think one of the reasons I really wanted to do this is because I am super thankful when I have patients, they come to me and they're like, I would like to get into an exercise program, or they're like, can you tell me what my, you know, like, do I have pre-diabetes, or can you tell me what my heart disease risk is? It's helpful to me because I need to be reminded too. And I don't take any offense if my patients are like, hey, I heard about this thing. Can you tell me if I'm at risk for it? Let's have a conversation. So I'm hoping, you know, that some folks took some of that away and, you know, maybe even going to their doctor being like, hey, look at my meds, you know, like, can you get me an exercise prescription? We do that now. So, you know, Christine Erlandson has created this whole exercise prescription that we can print out and give to people. But yeah, I'm really hoping that people are empowered to kind of move forward and kind of push their doctor to kind of get them or help them be healthier. Any other questions?
Sorry, I would love to keep this going forever, but we do have to end the call in about a minute here. And I just want to encourage everyone, if you do have additional questions, please do send them. I want to make sure that your questions are answered and that everything gets covered. And we really appreciate everyone being here. And thank you so much, Dr. Karas, for your presentation today. It was excellent. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. I will send the slides and the recording to everyone tomorrow. Bye. Thank you.